Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. We're a father-son business podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And you know what? I was telling our guest Sam, and I'll introduce him here in just a second, in Camden, that I'm getting anxious already. I started looking at the calendar. Hunting season's right around the corner. When this show comes out, folks, I'm going to be super anxious because we're going to be about eight days out from opening day of archery season in Colorado. Yes, folks, it is like Christmas for me and my hunting buddies. So, yeah, that's right. That's right. And I ain't getting enough of them. That's a sad thing when all I got to do is walk outside with the bow, pull it back, release, pull it back, release. It's right there, folks. Yeah, life can be.
Of course, it'll take you about a year to find an arrow if you miss in all those pine needles. Trust me.
Yeah. Yours are still out there, by the way. They're waiting for you to come pull them out. So, yeah. Speaking of that, speaking of shooting, we got our good buddy with us, Sam Havelock. Sam, how you doing today, brother?
Doing good. It's good to see you guys.
Man, it is great. I've been this episode has been. We waited way too long for this. I'll just say that. I mean, Cameron and I have been doing this for 4 years. You and I was trying to do the math. Man, 10, 15 years we've known each other.
Oh, more than that. We were in, we knew each other before the war on terrorism started back in Sahir.
That's right. Yeah.
We knew each other back when we were going to Kosovo and Bosnia.
Yeah. Back when we were, very young and very dumb, and very arrogant too in those days. So
we were blessed. That was the only thing going on at the time, and then the war kicked off, and it was all hell broke loose. But
life was much simpler then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
and the irony is, we didn't think it was simpler. That was the irony. Looking back on it in the armchair quarterback sense, yeah, it was simpler then, and. But shifting gears to simple. When you retired from the Navy, you went into the entrepreneur space, and that is, to me, and having done it, but it took me a couple of days to figure that out. The risk level that we have to accept in order to be successful as an entrepreneur is so counterintuitive to our life. When we were, back when we were on the teams and doing those things, what was that thing that made you say, all right, told your wife one night, this is what we're going to do, and you took that risk and stepped into
it? I think it starts with what I call Sam's theory of special operations, that the average unifying characteristic of most people in the special operations community, contrary to popular belief, is not superior strength, courage, physical fitness, athleticism, grit. We have all those things, but frankly, all those things are also in the infantry. Mm-hmm. I think that one of the defining personality characteristics of many people in the special operations industry is that they're natural born entrepreneurs, in that they want to practice the profession of arms with some degree of creative freedom and some degree of self-direction. They thrive in conditions of stress, pressure, and ambiguity, and thrive in conditions of resource constraint. Although you could argue that, today on the battlefield, your average soft warrior is bringing like every trick all the black magic is coming along with him or her.
Yeah,
but
no doubt.
Be that as it may, I think that the type of people who wind up showing up to selection course, showing up to become a special forces asset or person, or a SEAL, whatever the case may be, is combat controller, just is risk-seeking by nature. So with regards to answer your question, when I retired out of the military, out of U.S. Special Operations Command, I knew implicitly that I wanted to pursue entrepreneurialism for the second half of my adult life.
How did you go from that to taking those first steps and, really taking action moving forward on it?
Sure.
The idea?
I had always, and I used to get made fun of, right? At the SEAL teams, a lot of people would, one of the last things on the bird and one of the first things off the bird is typically the biggest television that you can find at the exchange, and then the video game consoles and all this other kind of stuff. Like, because guys were going to have that stuff set up literally within the first, the first cycle of darkness, the gaming was going to be up and running, like even back then. And Otis is laughing. He knows that's the case. The C-130 ramp goes down, out come over to the B-huts, right? That's the routine. But to answer your question, I would oftentimes bring these big green kit bags full of business books on deployment to try to. I had always known that what I wanted to. I didn't want to spend 30 years in the military. I wanted to practice entrepreneurialism whenever I was going to retire out of the military. And then it was just really a question of what I would do to try to create an early stage venture once I got out. The reality of needing to earn an amount of income, because again, your retirement doesn't really, especially if you're a 20-year retiree, it doesn't really cover everything. You have to have a real job, so to speak. So what I wound up doing was doing really consulting, management consulting, and some other odds and ends jobs out of the military while I worked on sort of my first venture, which was SOFX.com, concurrently. So it's basically kind of running a split book. I'd spend half my time doing management consulting or other work or projects for people. At that stage of the game, I have a background in defense acquisition work because that was one of my last jobs in SOCOM. And then the other half of my time I would be spent just building, working on the first venture I created, which is now is one of the largest newsletters in special operations called SOFX.
So you kind of answered this question. I think you really did, but I'll summarize it. You said, want to be an entrepreneur. Let me figure out what that is, what I want to do, instead of a lot of people, it can go either way. Talk us through the ideation, because Camden, I don't think we've really talked through that with any of our guests on the show, because
you talked with me on a couple episodes ago. But that's about it.
Count. You're just, yeah. Sam has a better experience with it. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, that ideation process, because with the guys that I work with through the Commit Foundation and Honor Foundation, there's a handful of them that'll go through that same process that you talked about, and I help them go through it. But I'd really love to hear your path in that ideation.
Sure. My approach was fundamentally informed by a class I attended when I was getting an MBA with regards to a theory called portfolio theory, which is basically how to manage the risk of high risk things. And to make a super long story short, the portfolio theory model basically says that if you are going to engage or invest in high risk endeavors, it is better to take a risk adjusted approach and invest in many endeavors rather than just one. So when people ask me what I do, I typically don't use the term entrepreneur. I typically use the term venture developer. What do I mean by that? Most early stage things are going to take years to materialize, although arguably there have been some big successes that have taken remarkably short time, and that's great for people who are able to line up things that way. but I was very committed to bootstrapping each of the different projects that I'd work on, and to work on several different projects concurrently, or ideas, in order to find a product market fit, and then really lower the effective dilution and the risk of having to be told what to do by investor owners for as long as possible. So what I've really been doing is running a venture studio, where I've on half of my time is spent helping other companies grow and scale, implementing business operating systems like the entrepreneurial operating system that was underwritten by Gino Trackman's book. I forget what it's, Traction. Gino Wickman.
Traction. Yeah. Traction.
And then EOS. So doing some of that, but then on the other hand, building companies. So SOFX is one. I wound up building a recruiting agency called SOFX Talent that leveraged all the newsletter distribution to help us conduct recruiting in the aerospace and defense community, is an example. Mm-hmm. And then on some of the other projects where I was co-venture developing, I would pick up an equity component, and typically cash, but sometimes it was just equity, on a variety of other things. So as an example, one thing I was involved with was the licensing of a technology out of the Medical University of South Carolina that had to do with measuring the time distance of blink responses as a objective measure of mild traumatic concussions. And so that wound up becoming a company called Blink TBI, which nowadays has a pretty good valuation and has a number of clinical studies that back that it does what it says it does, and seems to be doing real well. So those are like three examples, and then there's a variety of other things that I've been involved with, all along the theme of, is it nested with my personal mission to fight evil and avert suffering at scale? So I first sorted out, hey, what is the framework that allows me to say yes or no at that stage of the game? And it's still to this day, this issue of traumatic brain injury and concussion effect and measurement of mild concussions as a function of blast repercussion and stuff like that. It was really starting to emerge then. So it was definitely something I could get behind. I wasn't a founder of that company, but I was involved in some of the early licensing to come out of MUSC on that one. And then there's a couple other sort of odds and end projects that I've been working on.
How do you manage those different ventures at the same time? Because there's a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs out there. I don't keep these people in my circle very long, but I've met a lot of people who told me the same thing. It was like, you got to focus on one thing, pick one thing. You try to do everything at once, you'll fail at everything at once. How do you manage to keep all of those going at the same time and not get too caught up in one that you ignore others or whatever?
So it's a balancing act, and basically you've got to know how to find and work with people that can take your vision for a future worth having and execute against those objectives, so that you can spend much more of your time at the strategic and operational level of the plan, and then trust that people will tactically execute against those sort of business objectives. But I would say, Cam, that this business of focus is absolutely the $1 million question. Like, to this day, in full disclosure, mm-hmm. I sometimes wonder, well, could SOFX have been as big as Task and Purpose by this time? Mm-hmm. Had I 100% focused on SOFX? Could it be as big as any one of the other more prominent sort of war correspondent related publications? Probably so. The recruiting agency, it's a boutique agency We do a number of placements, but could it be much bigger and a bigger defense contractor and stuff like that? Probably. So I do think that there's a lot to be said for focus. It was just a question of it's funny because nowadays there's a new term come out called multrepreneur, where people are basically creating a platform business and then creating other businesses alongside that to leverage whatever their newsletter reach, their subscribers, or whatever the case may be. So I won't have a great answer for you until about 10 years from now to see if the multi largely it's a function of my personality of needing to have 15 plates in the year to feel whole, right?
Yeah.
But that's not different than special operations, like especially the JTAC guys. They've got to have, bombs dropping on target, people getting off helicopters, this, that, the other thing. Those guys are the classic sort of multitaskers, even though multitasking is scientifically proven it does not work.
But that's why we don't do multitasking. We focus on one thing and then we move to the next.
That's right.
There you go. Right. And I love that fact of I hadn't heard that multipreneur, but what I'll tie it back to that I heard and I think is extremely important is your mission statement, your purpose. And the interesting thing that I think people that say you got to focus on one thing don't understand is that I am focusing on one thing. I'm focusing on my purpose, and all these things I'm doing support my purpose. So I want to jump back on that because that's another issue that comes up a lot with my clients, other guests we've had, and our listeners is, well, how did you figure out that fight evil and avert suffering? I know I'm pretty close.
That's it. You got it.
All right. See, I read it every freaking morning on the SOFX newsletter.
That's right.
So it's working. It's working, brother. But how did you come up with that? Because that's a journey in itself.
It is. I think that the soldiers in general, or servicemen and servicewomen in general, are the 2% or 3% of the population that never lost track of that dream to be a superhero when they were young, right? And all kids go through it. They dream of someday growing up to be a superhero, right? And so when I looked at that and I thought really comprehensively about that, because before I was in the Navy, I was in the Marine Corps. Before I was in the Marine Corps, I was at the Citadel. I always wanted to be a soldier. I always wanted to be in the profession of arms. Like there was never any doubt that like that is what I needed to be doing. Now the conflict occurs when you're sort of in the service and you realize what the future looks like after you're about 42 years old, unless you're at one of the special mission units where you can literally operate until like Billy Waugh until you're 72 years old, like riding a horse through the Panchir Valley and stuff. But that's a whole edge case. We could do a whole hour on that. But in some units in special operations, you can continue to operate for the rest of your life. But for many of the mere mortals across special operations, the fun stops at about that age. So it was a question, well, where can I make a bigger impact and sort of feed that life mission? Fighting evil and avert suffering is basically what, in my mind's eye, is the thing that allows you to accept the risks of being a uniformed service member and all the heartache that comes with that and all the sacrifice. Because at the end of the day, without a shadow of a doubt that what you're doing matters and there are not many people willing to do it. And so if there is a human manifestation of what superheroes are, it is these people who put everything on the line, whether it's a fireman, a policeman, a nurse, a pilot, a SEAL, infantryman, a female hospital corpsman, whatever it is, these people who are sacrificing so much have never lost sight of that dream when they were a child. So it's never not been the case where fighting evil and averting suffering wasn't the main thing. It's always been the main thing. That's why it underrates that big loss, right? Like a lot of folks, when they get out, they're like, feel, well, shoot, is my life's best work behind me? That's what's so tough about transition.
Yeah.
I've never heard that comparison. It makes a lot of sense. Could you talk a little bit, because it sounds like it's almost this, like, I'm picturing, the senior in high school who still wants to be Superman, and you signed up going to the military, and then one day you're like, oh, I'm doing that. Like, was it kind of like a realization type thing where you followed the path and then you put it together? Or was that consciously what drove you forward, which was, what's the modern day superhero to go, be a special operator?
I think that it has to do with what it takes to be a person of service is having a love for other people that transcends a sense of self-preservation or personal advancement. Like, nobody joins the military because they think that they're going to become financially wealthy at the end. But I will say categorically and undeniably, they are emotionally wealthy across the years that they spent in the military, because they are united in purpose with the people that are standing to the left and right of them. And there is an awfully powerful, effective momentum when people are ethically, morally, and spiritually aligned with whatever the mission is, right? Whether it's to go and do hurricane relief, or whether it's to go into the Korengal Valley to take out a bomb maker that killed a bunch of Marines a couple weeks prior. That's an example, right?
This episode of the Cam and Otis Show is brought to you by Evergood Adventure Wines. Our loyal listeners know Evergood's founder, Matthew Hexter, from his appearances on the show that never disappointed, and don't worry, Evergood Adventure Wines doesn't disappoint either. Evergood is a craft winery from Colorado that makes wine from lemons, not grapes. Picture adult lemonades perfect for your next backyard barbecue or hanging out with friends at the beach or the pool. No need to drink a warm red grape wine when it's 100 degrees out or hotter here in Tucson. Evergood over ice is the perfect refreshment for a hot summer day. They come in a variety of flavors, including lemon, strawberry, lime, grapefruit, and watermelon. These non-carbonated wines check all the boxes: gluten-free, vegan, low sugar, and low in sulfites. Best of all, they taste damn good, and they have fun names, like their OG lemon wine called Skierpie. Yeah, you heard that right. And I'll tell you, Skierpie is one of my favorites. Evergood ships to 41 states, so you can order your lemon wines online at evergoodadventurewines.com. Plus, Matthew is offering 20% off for our listeners. Just use promo code CAM-OTIS at checkout to get 20% off and start enjoying these amazing lemon wines. Go to evergoodadventurewines.com or click the link in the description below and click Buy Now to redeem your Cam and Otis Show exclusive.
How did, and I'm not going to test my memory on this one because I cannot think of the phrasing, but you've got a great phrasing for your recruiting company it follows a similar sense to back in the day. How did that start to fill that void of helping people? And you got to say the phrase, because since I can't remember it.
Oh, with what? Building a future worth having, or
No. The headhunters in
headhunters then, headhunters now.
Yes, that's it. There you go.
Yeah, so the outcome's just different.
Yes,
but in the big scheme of things, if you think about what 95% of the work with regards to special operations is actually finding and relating to people and building a network of influence, and not finding a needle in a haystack, but finding a needle within a pile of needles. It's not that, needle in a haystack is one thing, but so if you look at the different skills and capabilities and attributes that the government has spent a ton of money investing in your average special operator, most of those skills can be parlayed in the civilian context toward how to find and engage talent. And if you think about it, A players know how to talk to other A players, and they also know when they're talking to a B player. And nobody is in the special operations community because they weren't an A player. They weren't a 5%er, right? You just can't. Everything about the accession program is designed to ensure that if you are not a top 5%er, you are out. So that's
what
came up with that.
What's a little bit different flavor? What was a transition gap? Because you and I have talked a lot about transition over the years, and serving those guys. What's a gap in that? Looking back, and you're like, man, that was a tough lesson to learn, but I finally learned it. What was something there?
What I know now that I wish I knew back then was relationships are as important to business as any set of ideas, any amount of capital, any sort of quote unquote innovation you think you're bringing to the table. The entire business world or commercial world is running on a current of interpersonal relationships that you don't see and you don't have access to as a separating serviceman. You've got your own relationships in the military, but the fact is that for the most part, none of them are going to equate to a good opportunity in the private sector. So if you want to be successful as an entrepreneur or as a professional that is going to embark on designing a new career path, my advice would be find and engage mentors in the private sector as early as possible. And these mentors are not and did not do the things you did at the units you used to serve at. You automatically have an in with them. That's fine. Don't take the easy way out and just say, well, General so-and-so, I served under him and he's great. And, and he's a deputy director at Lockheed or whatever the case is. And he might be able to get you an interview, but here's the news is the Lockheeds of the world are so big that the influence that one individual may have is, might help. But in the big scheme of things, the better relationship to have is the hiring manager that's working on a program line for some sort of tactical radio that you have a ton of experience with, right? And that's somebody who may never have been in the military, but that happened to go to your same high school. You got to do the work to you've got to establish real relationships with people way in advance, especially if you're going to go into entrepreneurialism, in whatever industry you're going to compete in. There's so much that we don't know. Like, we think that just because we're strong, committed, patriotic, smart, have boundless energy, that we're going to be successful as an entrepreneur, and none of it's true. It's as if we've got a fancy helicopter and we've got all the avionics, meaning all the skills that you think are going to make you successful because you have grit and determination, so on and so forth. But what I know now that I didn't know then is that all of those avionics are running on the wrong crypto segment. You're hearing this and it's just squabble. And you're hearing what you think you want to hear because you're optimistic about whatever it is you're building and so on and so forth. But ultimately, the only thing that the private sector markets understand is value creation. And that's it. If you're not creating value on the order of value created in excess of whatever you're asking somebody to pay you, and typically on an order of 10x of what you're asking them to pay you, you're going to have a really tough time. It's going to be a rough slog. They'll give you, because you're a vet and stuff, they'll give you all the time in the world. There's a lot of happy talk. But the truth is, people in the private sector, they want to shoot with us. They want to hunt with us. They want to drink beer with us. They want to take selfies with us, but they don't want to employ us. And they don't necessarily want to give us an opportunity or an outsized advantage unless they legitimately are your friend. And I can count on two hands the number of real mentors and real friends I've had in whatever it is, 12 years post-separation. Most of the time, and this is another thing, people in the private sector understand that people coming out of the military are business naive in the first couple of years coming out of the military. And there is, not everybody, but there are a lot of people that are going to take advantage of vets and get them to work for free on things in exchange for equity based on companies or ideas that are never going to go anywhere, because they're taking advantage of your optimism and your naivety and inability to actually make a rational business decision and sort of a cost of your time trade-off, because your crypto's off. You don't know when people are lying to you. And what I learned now, you have to assume that everything you're hearing is sort of right, but you got to research it, because people are going to tell you whatever advances their objective the fastest, independent of whether it has any relation to the truth or not. In the military, the culture is completely different, right? It's just the method of communication, your ability to understand body language, your ability to understand intent, motivation. You've got that stuff wired, but we are all completely institutionalized by the time we have been in there for more than 4 years. That's why the crypto's off.
Yeah.
It's not anybody's fault. It's just you have a rough, experience is the roughest kind of teacher. She gives you a test first and the lesson afterwards.
That's right. Yeah.
In that kind of vein there, experience as the teacher, is it the word that comes to mind is like natural process almost, that it's like you basically got to go through 2 years of that adjustment? Or is this an area where, where we can help to bridge that gap to help people make that transition more smoothly? Because I don't know, I think a lot of the times when we start talking like entrepreneurship and things, there's so many lessons that you could try to just pass to somebody, but they don't necessarily learn. You kind of have to get hit in the mouth a few times. Do you think this is one of those things?
Actually got a great, I chat with people all the time, like guys coming out of the military that are wanting to build things. And the thing is, the first thing I say is like making people feel bad about their career choices and their life is a $1 trillion industry in the United States, right? With different sort of solutions. Don't confuse finding your purpose with like putting bread on the table. Like it's okay. Realize that your first set of jobs out of the military are not going to be your forever jobs. And by the way, there are no forever jobs in the real world, and there's no loyalty there either. You aren't signing up for anything. There is no big reenlistment bonus. You might get a bundt cake at Christmas, but you're not going to get a $100,000 thing for sticking on for another year. So the bottom line is, if a opportunity comes to you and it puts an adequate amount of income in your bank account, and there's an opportunity for two other dimensions, which is learning, number one, but the even more important thing to look for in any opportunity is what relationships that I would never get access to can I make with this opportunity? Because there too, the real opportunity, what we know this as recruiters, as headhunters from our recruiting practice, all the good opportunities, the really good chances are all trading word of mouth, right? They're not on these job boards. And it could be the case where somebody you worked with or served with 5 years ago can get you access into a company and get your foot in the door. And that's another thing where people, a lot of times they're like, oh, well, that position, that's not exactly, what I was thinking, or the title doesn't comport to me. The bottom line is get in play first, prove your value, and you are going to do really, really well. But don't sit there around and wait for perfect, because that island called perfect, she's awfully hard to get to. And it's a rough set of seas, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question. Restate the question. I'll be more direct.
Yeah, no, just that, there's lots of entrepreneurial lessons,
yes,
or really just life lessons that it's like you could try to teach somebody, but they really got to get hit in the face. It seems like you're kind of saying, you got hit in the face. You got to get hit in the face.
So the other thing that I learned about when I was getting my MBA, nothing about an MBA prepares you for actually leading, building, and scaling early stage ventures, even though there's programs, right? You can go to Wharton and track in that. You can go to Harvard and track in that. You can go to whatever your local or state college and track in that. But the real learning happens like when you're fixing to not make payroll. The real learning happens is when you've got somebody that you're relying on somebody to do something, they didn't do it, and now you've got 5 customers that are absolutely pissed at whatever went on. So the way to bridge the gap between, this is Sam's opinion, the way to bridge the gap between, this would be my advice for any veteran contemplating entrepreneurship as a way they're going to spend the rest of their lives, would be to consciously try to find an opportunity in an early stage venture where you can be paid to learn from their mistakes. Mm-hmm. In a place, ideally within a industry and functional area that underpins whatever sets of ideas you have. Because basically the ability to land your first beachhead customers, find a product market fit, talk to 100 people before you build anything, all those things require footing in whatever industry you're talking about. So as an example, and I'll use this as a rough one, if you've got some idea for a private military security contractor application or something like that, try to find a startup somewhere that's working on something that is in the security industry, so on and so forth, that already has enterprise customers. You're establishing relationships. I know it makes many servicemen throw up in their mouth over the idea of being in sales or business development, but there's a secret hiding in plain sight regarding business. There's only 3 things in business. Can you make it? Can you sell it? Can you count the money? Here's the news. They're typically, the count the money part, you hire people for that. The people who are typically excellent at counting the money, and that's what they dream about, are called accountants and CFOs and CPAs, and they typically don't have the risk appetite to go and start their own things. So you can find the most competent money counters that money can buy. You don't have to worry about that as much. Can you make it? Just depends on what you're working on. Can you sell it is more important than can you make it. Because if you can't sell it, it doesn't matter how good you can make it. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to be inoculated against this negative self-talk that says, I'm not a salesman, I don't do that. Then don't be an entrepreneur because you're going to fucking fail. It's that simple. An entrepreneur is always selling. Fred Wilson, one of the most successful venture capitalists in the world, once said, well, what is the role of a CEO? He said, that's really simple. The role of a CEO is to find the best talent in the world, constantly relay what the vision is of the company, and make for sure you don't run out of money. And the moderator said, "Is there anything else?" He goes, "Nope, everything else has to be outsourced." So you're selling. You've got to be selling a vision. You've got to be selling that people should come on your team. You've got to be selling a product. You've got to be selling credibility in yourself. And you just have to get over the fact that if you want to be in this business, sales is the main thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's not, I think part of that whole sales thing is we all think it's the used car salesman that's trying to swindle the guy, the private, the used car dealerships that are right outside the gate of our bases, that are swindling the private into, that just came back with a bonus. That's still sales, but that's the shitty sales, right? What we're talking about is the sales that you just did the last 20 years, the last 4 years when you're in the service, because you know what? You were selling what you could do in your job when you were in, whether you were in special ops or the finance corps. It doesn't matter. You were still selling in that area. I think that's the shift. And I'll give a shout out to my buddy, John Rankin, who runs Sales Platoon, which is a training organization for veterans transitioning out to help them start to realize that, hey, you've been doing sales. I'm going to give you the skills. I'm going to help you learn the crypto, to use your metaphor. I'm going to show you the crypto so that you can do it going forward. And it leads me to something I was thinking about, another gap that I'm curious if you felt the same thing in growing your business is scaling. Because in the military, we get assigned the team, right? I mean, it's like they sir, your desk is over there and the guys are right here, go meet your team, whatever, that sort of thing. Whether you're an officer or an NCO, you're assigned to the team. You're not going out and building the team.
Right.
How did you handle that next stage where you went, I can't do it all myself. I got to go to the next level?
Yeah. I mean, you've got, and that's always a thing. Like many different veterans and especially special operations guys are going to be like, I don't need the help. I can do it myself. I'm going to do it better. You've got to be, you eventually have to be somewhat comfortable with the car accidents happening, because they will happening, but you have to leverage other people and trust that there's going to be things that if you were running the thing or whatever the case may be, that mistake might not have been made. But that's like, your people have got to learn, and you got to empower them to be successful, or they're not going to learn and grow into the type of mid-level leaders and managers that you need them to be. So it's just, again, it's trial and error. But nowadays, for example, we do not work with a teammate unless I've run objective personality indexes on them, no matter whether they're a contractor or an employee, because the science is there and the tools are available, and I can know with a degree of certainty that it would be unable to get close to if I had myself and my most intuitive, brightest teammates in an interview. It doesn't matter, right? You really have to use tools that, specifically psychographic assessments, that tell you about people's emotional intelligence, their cognitive intelligence, and their personality. Because a lot of times the environment that you've got to offer them is not a place they're going to thrive anyway. So what's going to happen there? You're going to have a pissed off teammate, and there's no amount of anything that's going to, and you're going to have a hard conversation. It's a question of whether you're going to have it sooner or whether you're going to pay them for a couple of years and struggle with it ad nauseum until you eventually pull the trigger and tell them that they've got to seek opportunities elsewhere. So we rely on the science nowadays, as well as interview.
This episode of the Cam and Otis Show is brought to you by Tribe and Purpose. Are you tired of dealing with the cost of bad leadership? It's time to make a change. The Green Beret Leadership Program is your key to unlocking the full potential of your team. By developing leaders in your business, you'll get a proactive and responsible team that embraces challenges, takes calculated risks, and takes action without constant supervision. Developing great leaders can take a lot of time and energy, and that's why businesses tend to opt for the trial by fire and school of hard knocks path to leadership. The truth is that wastes time and money, and it puts a lot of extra stress on your leadership team and the rest of the team. Poor leadership drives away quality talent, and the longer you wait to fix the problem, the more talent you're going to wind up losing. With the Green Beret Leadership Program, you can use the battle-tested leadership principles of the Green Berets to develop great leaders in your team faster with the School of Hard Knocks. You'll see changes in just a few short weeks. The longer you wait to take action, the more damage poor leadership can do to your business. Learn more about the impact GBLP can have on your business and schedule your free coaching call with your Green Beret coach, Otis McGregor, now at findyourpurpose.coach/GBLP, or click the link in the description below. Don't leave your team to struggle on their own. Give them the tools they need to be great. Talking about that they're not going to thrive right away. I think that's a little bit like the natural growth going into any position, especially in a startup, earlier phase venture. What do you think you can do as a leader to make them either comfortable with the fact that they're not thriving, or I got a little psychology trick going, or make them feel like they're thriving even though they're not? Like, what's your experience there?
Generally, I like to, and this is not the case in the vast majority of especially stable middle market and large companies, where you can be dumb and non-productive and enjoy a nice 20-year career, 30-year, whatever. And there's just enough going on in the system that you can just get by. In an early stage venture, that you can't do that, because there's early stage ventures are always in a condition of resource constraint. They're constrained with time, they're constrained with money, and they're constrained with manpower. The only strength they have is agility and speed to basically pivot and move out. With regards to quote unquote fixing people, I have a really simple format. It's not original to me. It's comes right out of that book. Otis and I were talking about that has to do with the people. It's basically, do people get the mission of the company? Are they willing to buy into it? And can they do the work that we've hired them to do? So get it, willing to do it, can do it. If they're falling down on one of those dimensions, you can typically reel them back in. If they're falling down on two, it's going to be a tough slog, and they're probably going to be unsuccessful, and you will too. If they're three, then it was just a mishire, and it's better for you to move them faster than slower, and they know that. It's never hard. It's never that hard a conversation when people are falling down, especially if you've taken, and you can gently explain that framework, and you basically put them on a personal improvement plan for 90 days, but you've got to set hard stops. You can't. What happens is, if somebody's a bad fit in an organization, there's an exponential negative effect they have on other teammates and in the system itself. Because a company is really just an information communication system. That's how it creates value. It creates a value chain, but it's more often than not is all about the interpersonal communications that affect the ability to move something from here on a product line up to whatever. When you've got ineffective people in those roles, you wind up having problems.
What's a problem I've known about for years in all the services is that we promote people that are like us. So
right.
We tend to have it perpetuates some bad personalities, if you will. How are you preventing that in your business as you grow and scale and identify potential leaders? What's your methodology for that?
We rely heavily on those indexes, because the fact is that some people, all they ever asked to do was to be craftsmen. all they ever really wanted to do was work on the thing. All they ever wanted to be was an engineer. So all the big mistakes are made when you try to re-roll people into what you think they should be doing next, vice what they were really good at and were happy doing. So you've got to basically align your compensation and incentive plans to ensure that people are in the sweet spot of where their superpowers are. How that doesn't work in the military is that we've got this up and out program. And the reason why there are a lot of poor leaders let me rephrase that. How is it that an extremely poor or toxic leader can eventually make it to a very high rank? Is that the entire system is designed to enable people to not fail at leadership at scale. So a lot of people think, well, because the military has got all these great leaders, like it must have the secret recipe for creating leaders. No. The military has got 5,000 years of tools to promote what's called alignment. Half the people that are in leadership positions in the military weren't, I'm pulling that out of the air, but a good number of people that are in leadership positions in the military, absent all the alignment systems that form the foundation and the bedrock of the system itself, would suck if they didn't have performance evaluations to rely on, if they didn't have NCOs that could encourage people to do things certain ways, if they didn't have all these different methodologies, the award system. So there's so many carrots in the toolbox, so many sticks in the toolbox. You have to try to suck at leadership in the military to fail at it. Like you have to really put in effort because there's so much to compel organizational alignment that a lot of people that you think are remarkable leaders have just worked with the tools, right? If you look at your average company, it's a much harder place to lead than the military. And the reason is because they don't have the depth of the type of tools and the strict adherence to like performance reporting where that stuff makes a difference. Get tanked on a couple fit reps, your career is over. You know that. You're gone. Right? So we've got very, very sophisticated ways and that's to get people aligned with whatever needs to get done. And it makes leadership a lot simpler in the military.
You know, there's something you mentioned there, you know, talking about leadership, you know, when you look in the business world, there's this interesting effect where, you know, you have the promotion bias where it's like people who succeed, but they take a huge risk. So you want to get these people who basically just get lucky all the way up, and because they're just diving into the risk every single time, because that's what's rewarded inside of the business. It sounds like there was a similar kind of effect you were talking about with leadership inside the military, because you don't have the capacity to fail, that it almost makes you really risk adverse in a way. Did I catch that right? Could you talk a little bit more about that?
I don't think that in large organizations risk is rewarded as much as we ascribe to what I would call this goes back to a point I made earlier in the conversation where relationship is rewarded. And there's we could sit here for the rest of the podcast and talk about who was mentoring who in the military and then why they became whatever exalted leader they wound up becoming, but they were being mentored from a very young age, right? And they were being, okay, you're going to go do this job next. And then after that, you're going to go do this job and so on and so forth. And that's not any different than General Electric. That's not any different than any of these large Lockheed Martin or anything else where people have been human beings pick winners all the time. Like the system is absolutely as rigged as you think it is. And a lot of times the people that have the strongest advancements are not the ones with the best ideas or the best risk appetite or whatever. They just know interpersonally how to play that game. And if you want to be blind to that game, God bless you, but realize that it's the thing. It goes back to the relationships discussion.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've taught that lesson to some young NCOs and officers that when I look back on my career, that was probably the biggest mistake I made, because I always operated under the aspect of, hey sir, I'll call you if I need anything. Just assume everything's good to go. Whereas a peer, down the hall was sending an email, hey sir, we did this, this, and this today, and so the commander went, damn, those guys are kicking ass. Otis is doing all right.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing.
It's both self-promotion and, but let's call it marketing. So it's one, if you are the consummate, soft, quiet professional where you don't say shit about the great things you've done,
nobody knows,
because you might be, be the weight on the performance evaluations. Because your other peers have been doing self-promotion, or, they'll wind up having a personality where they're very engaging, and they build a rapport with their senior leaders, and that personality, that rapport building is a key to liking somebody and having empathy for somebody, and that takes on a life of its own, independent of their skills or capability. They could be the dumb as a box of rocks, but they know how to work relationships, and they advance.
It's almost like, I just put this together, but it's almost like top of mind marketing when you have these really big brands like a Coca-Cola. It's like they're not really trying to sell you on Coke; they're just trying to get you to remember that Coca-Cola exists. Like, I think about that all the time. And like the rugby example for me out there coaching, it's whoever's kid pops in my head. Like, it's not who's the best at that spot necessarily. Right. It's, George can do that. Go grab George. Like, just because his name is there, he might be the kiss ass kid who comes up and talks to me all the time, but he's just playing the relationship game. I love that.
Hey, I got a reverse question for you, because usually I ask this in the, back to the drill sergeant days sort of thing. What's that? But because you and I both work for Admiral McRaven, I'm curious, what's a lesson that the Admiral, that you got from the Admiral, whether he taught it to you or you saw it, that is still like, man, that is such a key part of who I am going forward today?
I didn't work directly for Admiral McRaven, although I have a lot of respect for him. One person we both worked for, where I can clearly answer that question, is Eldon Bargewell, which is, for those listeners who may not know, he is consummate, like a soldier's soldier, literally one of the toughest men I've ever met, and literally one of the most, sort of the biggest heart, but like the meanest bastard in the world, but he had the biggest heart as well, right? But
stay on the good side. He's definitely that guy.
Yeah, he's that guy. But and I remember, this is a great story. I was cleaning. I was serving as his aide de camp at SOCUR, and I was clean. We were boxing something up because I think he was moving, or whatever the case may be. And I lifted up a Viet Cong chest harness that had like a bullet hole in it, and I was like, "Holy shit, sir! Look at this! Who did you get this guy? Who did you get this off of, or whatever?" And he's like, "I was wearing that thing. That AK-47 magazine saved my life." And then I pulled up the tag, like, "Holy shit, sir!" There was like a dent in the thing. It was amazing. But the thing that I learned about from him that I take to this day is that when people are being super complicated in the way that they're talking to you or explaining things, do not trust them. Force them to bring things down to a level where they're clearly communicating. Because behind every set of fast talking explanations is obfuscation, right? And so I think part of, because as the aide de camp, you get to see the real him, and you get to see like how he handled people, and what a lot of his personality with regards to having to make difficult decisions under stress, pressure, and ambiguity. The personality, the way he carried himself, was to ensure that nobody was coming up to him with half-baked stuff that wasn't well reasoned or that wasn't going to ultimately like waste time. So he and that same characteristic, I think, reverberates among some of the many of the best leaders that we've come across. Stanley McChrystal, Admiral Eric Olson, a lot of them have got this stoic, quiet, intimidating demeanor, and that's because they're interested in doing the nation's work in the way possible that minimizes the risk of loss of life, so on and so forth. So it was a really powerful lesson.
Yeah, and he was a great guy to work for.
Absolutely.
And it's that, and you know what it goes back to is what you said earlier is how important the relationships are. And God, those guys you just named, every one of them. I mean, I can remember General McChrystal walking through the mess hall and going, "Hey, Otis," and I'm like, "Holy shit! How the hell does he know me?" You know, that kind of stuff. You know, in just in those sort of interactions, that the ability to create relationships.
Yep.
And what that did for us as units, as soldiers and sailors, is just amazing. It set such a great example for us. But they also held that confidence and not arrogance.
General McChrystal's understanding of the value of relationships were sort of next level understanding, right? Like he understood that in order to engage in the battle that we had, not the battle that we wanted, in the GWAT, it was going to be essential that he break down the barriers between the different intelligence community assets, the different network of stakeholders that could really take the fight forward, but fight in an informed and elegant way that maximized effect but minimized loss of life in a highly connected world, right? Where everything's on video, everything's on whatever. He understood, and I mean, to this day, he's a master at that. He knows that.
Oh yeah. He is. I've got one of my favorite books, Team of Teams. You know, and partly because I lived that.
Yeah, for sure.
I was one of those dudes when he was doing that. So, yeah, great guys, great examples to work for. And by the way, folks, Team of Teams translates directly to your business in the way that General McChrystal ran our operations back in the day is a great way to run your business. So I'm giving you, hey sir, I'm giving you a little plug here for your business, but it is, there's a lot to be said for not creating those stovepipes, having a flat organization that's dynamic. Yeah, it was fun to work for, which leads me to what I learned today. And I don't think I've ever heard the way you talked about experience, how it's test and then lesson. I love that because it's partly because it's so damn true. Yeah. And it's like, man, I'd never heard of that, but it's another one of those blatantly obvious things is guess what, you know, because it's an experience. You get tested and then you get to learn how to do it again. And then you get tested again and you may get it right. You may get more experience, but either way, it's such a great way of thinking about it. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
So I'm going to be breaking our mold a little bit. Now we're coming up on 280 of episodes, so sorry for this, Dad. But I actually have a question a little bit, because I think I learned this, but I want to run it by you two first. So, you know, talking about ideation in the business and, you know, going through those first couple of years in the startup world and all the lessons you learned, this idea kind of occurred to me that you should pretty much, if you're early entrepreneur, you know, the kid in college with the idea, that kind of thing, almost take that first idea and put it in the back pocket, take that second idea, go take those hard knocks, go take those failures, and then bounce back to the good idea, you know, a little bit later down the road. So you're not risking your favorite child in that first learning stage. What are y'all's thoughts on that? Is that a good lesson, or do I need to work on it a little bit?
I'll go first, Sam. I disagree. If you got a good idea, do what Sam said. You take it out there and you test the market. I would not take that good idea and put it in the back of my notebook and wait 5 years for me to try my second best idea and fail at that and then pull out the good idea. Because I can tell you, here's what's going to happen. If you've got a good idea, how many billion people are on this earth? I guarantee you there's 100 people that got that same idea. So don't waste that good idea. Do it. Take that and go forward. Don't waste it. Sam, what do you think?
I think that every idea is always and everywhere 15 to 45 degrees off from commercially viable. And the only way to basically stress test it is to create a prototype of it first by talking to people to even imagine what the prototype might do or how it might behave. And then to test it in a real market. And that's where all the key learnings happen, right? Everybody's idea is a little wonky. I don't think that there's any pure play out there. So in the big scheme of things, as a venture developer, I think about technology and I hold as a theory of mine that technology is actually just a commodity. And the reason I say that is because I can go to any one of these university systems tomorrow morning and license for a nominal sum of money fantastic sets of intellectual property, patent work that they've spent tens of thousands of dollars registering, all this stuff. What the high demand, low density asset in the market is actually people who can execute against it. There's no shortage of technology, none. And there's no shortage of good ideas, zero. What matters always and everywhere is execution. And the sooner you can go into the fighting ring, into the cage and start getting punched, the better off you are. Because that's the only way. That's the only way you emerge with anything of any value.
Okay, well, I did have a backup there.
Yeah, that's right.
What I did learn. Yeah, no. Sam, you said this at the end, and I think I've heard this lesson in a lot of different ways before. But you talk about fighting the battle we had, not the battle we wanted, and that's just such a simple piece of advice. Like so often, you can try to think, oh, if only things were different. Nah, just do what's in front of you. Go take action, move from there. So there's what I did learn.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Sam, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
Just how much I miss the community. I mean, I don't get to yes, I do run sort of one of the world's biggest special operations newsletters, but day in and day out, I don't necessarily get to be with the people I've known for more than 2 decades and have a bunch of shared experiences doing what I call real work. Like back when the shit that we did was like the work of a nation, right? And I come away from this, and in retrospect, I've had some successes, I've had some failures for sure. That's part of it. And looking back, like 11 years into it, I don't know if it was necessarily a great idea to get out. I really don't. And a lot of people are going to sit there and say, "Oh, you must be so happy." I'm happy for my family because they got stability, and I'm happy that I have the luxury of being self-directed and working on interesting things. But the mountain peaks of those happinesses have those mountain peaks are a lot less elevation than the happiness of when I was just running around with guys like your dad. Like that was real happiness. That was like my life. And when I'm around this type of thing, it's just, I'm reminded, I'm thrown headlong into the reality that I'm not sure whether that was the best idea in the world, but here we are.
Yeah. Well, I've thought the same thing on many occasions. I'll just tell you, there's some of those accomplishments and things we've done that made us who we are today, and created the success of what we are today. yeah, those peaks were just a wee bit higher. I'll just say that. That's a great way of putting it. Sam, how do folks find you, get in touch with you, see what y'all got going on?
Sure. They can always just send me an email at sam.havelock@sofx.com. I would invite anybody listening to sign up for the newsletter. It's free. We don't rent, sell, or share the list to anybody. And if you really pay attention to the content in the newsletter, 2/3 of it is all about personal empowerment. There's only 1/3 of it that's about special operations. And the reason for that is because I wanted to help operators build a future worth having. And our choice of content to include in that, other than the special operations stories, is always about health, fitness, wellness, wealth building, opportunities, so on and so forth. So SOFX isn't just for soft guys. It's for people who want to move the needle in their personal life. And you're all welcome to subscribe. And it's a lot of fun.
And I love it. Like I said, dude, I've been probably since day one.
Yeah.
I was probably, I'd like to say I was one of the first 10, but maybe
you might be, yeah.
Quite that early. I was pretty early in it. And every morning, man, I'm on my bike. I'm reading it.
It's great.
I'm reading it. So I love it. I plug it. It is a great resource. So, hey, Sam, man, we really appreciate your time today. It's good to catch up with you, brother.
Thank you so much. You guys have a blessed day, and I look forward to when the podcast comes out, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of the Cam and Otis Show. A special thanks to our guest, Sam Havelock, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at the Cam and Otis Show. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass it along to others in your life so that they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, the full archive of our episodes available at www.camandotisshow.com. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.